This video is the second in a 3-part series going through the creation of my short film, Snowfall. If you haven't seen that or part 1 yet, go watch them and then come back to this video. They're in the description. This video is going to be all about materials, lighting, and rendering. The materials I used in the project were a mix of ambientcg, quixel, and then a bunch of custom ones. If you don't know, ambientcg is a website with over 2,000 Creative Commons, royalty-free textures. Because a lot of the plants that I used were from Quixel, I used those materials and then converted them into Redshift standard materials for most of them. Some ground textures were also from Quixel, and then some were from ambientcg. The skin shader for the character is pretty simple. It's basically just a normal material with some subsurface scattering. And I also added some thin film because it made it more interesting, sort of. The bricks material used on the castle and in a couple other places uses the newish bricks shader in Redshift, layered with some accent noise to break it up a little bit. Now onto lighting. For a lot of the shots, the lighting was pretty simple. Most of them just used an HDRI and an infinite light to just make it a little brighter. And then for most of the shots, I also added an edge light to the characters that was turned off for everything else. That made it so the edge light didn't have to affect the environment, but would still light up the hair and stuff. The next step was rendering, and it ended up being way more complicated than I had originally thought. The project has 5,700 frames, and ended up taking over 700 hours to render. Luckily, my friend @Plenty from Blender here on YouTube and Instagram let me render half the shots on their computer, significantly cutting down the time. The render settings were mostly default, but with the threshold set to either 0.1 or 0.2 depending on how bright the shot was. I also used the Intel Open Image Denoiser to clean up some of the noise. And I rendered in ambientcg to help with color grading and compositing, but I'll get more into that in part 3. In the AOVs, I rendered the beauty pass as well as a version of the beauty pass without the denoising, just in case. I also rendered the depth pass for adding more fog in post, even though I also added a Redshift environment object for that too, but that's also in part 3. As well as a crypto mat, to be able to easily select parts of the scene in After Effects for compositing. And on some shots with the magic effects, I also added a volume lighting pass that didn't end up being useful because the fog also was in that pass, and it was hard to extract the magic stuff. So yeah, that's all for this video. Part 3 going over compositing and color grading will be out soon.